Otsego Lake. It's located in northern Otsego County. It includes 5 towns in the village of Cooperstown in the watershed. It is the headwaters for the Susquehanna River. And there's the size of the watershed for the lake. Some data on the lake itself. Not quite as big as Lake George, but a very nice lake. It is a drinking water supply for the village of Cooperstown, about 2,000 full-time residents year-round, but hundreds of thousands of visitors. I mean, it's the Hall of Fame, baseball and youth baseball, and of course the lake. It is a source of drinking water for about 40% of the camps around the lake. It is a cold water fishery, and it's a beautiful lake. Here's the delineation for the watershed. In the northern part of the watershed, very heavy in agriculture, land use. East and west of the lake, steep slopes and fairly wooded land cover. Water quality. The lake has been monitored by the SUNY Biological Field Station since 1968. And in the 30 some odd years up to the year 2000, what we saw was an increasing trophic state from oligotrophic to mesotrophic. And of course, the indicators are chlorophyll A, total phosphorus being up. Phosphorus concentrations were in the 12 to 14 parts per billion range at that time. Water clarity was down, so all those indicators. And we had issues with deep water oxygen late in the season. Some more information on water quality. Because of the concerns for aging septic systems, we did some sampling near shore for fecal coliform and found increased counts during July and August for several summers. We also wanted to get a handle on phosphorus migration, and we did studies along that. And this is a biological field station doing this. Down gradient of septic systems. 200 times ambient lake levels, what we found in terms of concentration, and the soils were saturated with phosphorus. A lake management plan was put together in the 90s. Had representatives from the municipalities. The field station was involved. DEC was also involved. And it was completed in 1998. The biggest threat to the lake was identified as nutrient loading. It was not a real big surprise because of the high degree of agriculture in the watershed, but also the concern about aging septic systems. The action plan certainly related to that agriculture septic system, but also identified invasive species as an issue and shoreline erosion. And it kind of established credibility with DEC in terms of getting grants. The progress since 2000, a lot of effort has gone into BMPs for ag in the northern part of the watershed, 200-foot no-wake zone, boat inspection program for invasive species control, a lot of wetland restoration work, installation of riparian buffers, sediment detention basins, and then the inspections of septic systems. In the management plan, it said all septic systems will be maintained in proper working order. A lake protection zone was established 500 feet from the lake and 100 feet from tributary streams, and that all existing systems would be inspected, and failures would be upgraded within 1 year. The authority in the watershed Supervisory Committee, this committee was established under public health law, Section 1100, Watershed Rules and Regulations in the 70s, the late 70s. And this committee is made up of representatives of the municipalities and the village of Cooperstown. And the committee manages land. It basically is there as to protect the lake as a drinking water supply. So it looks at all activities that relate to water quality, reviews and approves septic system designs, and grants variances for grandfathered systems. Although it had the authority to inspect systems, there were not detailed procedures or regulations related to an inspection program. So we had to develop that. And we got some great help from Otsego Lake. Otsego Lake Watershed, we really modeled this program after what Otsego Lake has. So we had to get that all back, all kind of into local law. And we did that by 2004. And in 2005, we began to do inspections. And these were mandatory. These were mandatory inspections. The regulations, I've mentioned the zone of protection. It was set up to be a 5-year plan, a cycle of 5 years to inspect all systems. Past systems would get a certificate of compliance, good for 5 years. Failed systems, a notice of violation with 1 year to upgrade. And the emphasis was on enhanced systems. I mean, there was not any situation where you could put in a conventional system. Small lots, steep slopes, poor soils, shallow depth of bedrock and groundwater. So dealing with enhanced systems no matter what. We started to get our funding in 2003. In 2004, we did a lot of preparation. Very, very important to get to do public education. So mailings to watershed property owners, articles in the newspaper, very, very important aspect. We did an inventory. We had summer interns, and they went door to door with a questionnaire for one summer. And we learned a lot from that inventory. And we got training in terms of doing inspections. And we started inspections in 2005. In 2009, we completed the first cycle, and I'll share those results with you shortly. So the inspections obviously are arranged with the homeowner. They're conducted using the on-site training network protocol. It's a 6-page inspection protocol. The inspection includes a pump out to get a better look at the tank, so visual inspection of all components, and a hydraulic test. Test every water discharge to make sure that it's directed to the septic tank. And then a report is put together with a recommendation on pass versus fail. Give you an idea of what we found during inspections. Typical lakeside home, right on the waterfront. We were beginning to dig up the septic tank there. You'll get another shot at that in a minute. And the camp is backed right up against a steep slope. And there's the top of the septic tank. Not exactly a watertight top. And we found a lot of corroded metal septic tanks. That was, cause for instant failure. I mean, these tanks were just simply not watertight. Older systems, 40, 50 plus years, that's what they used. They used metal tanks. Here's a seepage pit. Got a nice convenient overflow there. The lake is just downhill from that. And we found systems everywhere. I mean, people didn't know where systems were, but we had to find them underneath a deck there. Here's a creative use of I think that's a beer keg, for a gray water system. Somebody decided to use a water tank for a septic tank, real thin wall, deformed quickly. More metal tanks. Here's a camp. A lot of camps on very tiny lots. This was on 1/10 of an acre. And there was the wastewater system was a seepage pit in back of the camp that drained into the shale bedrock. That was it. The program was administered by me as the watershed coordinator. We have an inspector, a trained inspector to do the inspections. And we used GIS to help track our progress with the program. I've mentioned we did send certified letters to property owners. I've already covered this. I want to get down to criteria for an acceptable system. Very important to have this very clear. Structurally sound and watertight tanks, no wastewater breakout like in a field, absorption field, all waste discharges connected to the system, no separate gray water, and alarm systems and pump controls in good working order. Get an up or a down on the inspection. For failed systems, we provided a written guidebook to property owners whose systems failed. I mean, it's a really, really big deal. We supplied them with a list of PEs for designing their system, and there was extensive follow-up. I mean, the regulations stated 1 year, but if it took 2 years, or it sometimes took 3 years, we just kept working with people, and we didn't knock them over the head. It was a real collaborative effort. And of course, we had a database to track the system, and of course, the inspections that occur, the engineer has to inspect, you all know that. Where we are, for the first cycle, we inspected 370 systems. Oh, that's interesting how that worked. Yeah, that's all right. 190 failed, so 51% failed inspection. Since then, this one was cycle 1. All of these systems have been replaced at full property owner expense. There was no money. There was no funding to help property owners. They paid for the systems. We could take legal action. We did in a few cases, but it didn't go very far. Once they got their letter from the town attorney, they decided to replace their system. Cycle 2, 2010 to 2014, failure rate of 4.1%. A nice decrease, which we expected. Cycle 3, 2 years, we're in our third year now with 2017, 4.4%. So what we're finding now is, because the systems are more complicated, are failures in the control systems. So that's something that we really look for. Replacement systems. This is one of the main reasons why we're replacing systems. There's a Swiss cheese tank, metal tank there. This don't you have to look too closely at this map. This is a soil limitations map. Both yellow and red is bad. There's nothing good about the soils. Not only the soils in terms of permeability, infiltration rates being really poor, but just topography. Everything was not good. So that led us to, as I mentioned earlier, the enhanced systems for replacement systems. Raised beds, aerobic treatment units, ATUs, gravelous drain fields. You've heard about the Elgin in drain. We have many Elgin fields in our replacement systems. Media filters, very interesting. Textile, foam, peat, as you heard about from Puriflow, and sand filters. They've been around for a long time. And we did look at phosphorus removal. I'll talk more about that when I get on with this a little bit. Here's the camp you saw in the beginning, with the wooden top. This is an installation of an ATU. What you see in the foreground is a trash tank / pump tank. The ATU is in the background. You can see in the lower right, there's a raised bed, and there's where the field is, and there's an Elgin field there. Typical Moore systems, very similar systems. Because these sites were difficult to get to, using a plastic tank made sense, but it had to be a very heavy-duty polyethylene tank. And this tank is made by Frelo. It's the only one the Watershed Committee approved for use as a plastic septic tank. And we also had to be creative. Here's a deck system. There's an ATU that's right there. Here's a foam media filter going in. Here's another typical situation where you have a pump station, pumps up to the septic tank and then to the absorption field. For all of these designs, we tried to get the absorption field as far back on the property from the lake as possible. So many pump-up systems. As I mentioned, we did look at phosphorus removal devices, systems. We had a demonstration project. I'll talk more about that. This particular system used an active media called an active mixture. It was basically granular iron oxide, which adsorbs phosphate. They work great to begin with, like over 90% removal, but it would last maybe a couple of years before the media was completely used up and would have to be replaced. This particular one was made by Knight Systems called the NERD. We had a demonstration project funded with a grant with DEC where we looked at enhanced systems. And each one of the systems did have a phosphorus removal device on it. The systems were monitored for 3 years by the biological field station. And these were shared systems by two camps. This one is a foam media filter made by Waterloo Biofilter. There's the finished system. The unfinished shed is where the biofilter is. The effluent from there went through a phosphorus removal device and then to a drain field in the foreground. It was fully treated by then. That's just simply subsurface dispersal at that point, because it is fairly close to the lake. We also looked at the textile media filter made by Orenco. This is an Advantex. This was the best performer in terms of our demonstration, in terms of percent removal of BOD and total suspended solids. Great system. So how are we doing today? This is 15 years later. The trophic state has been reversed from mesotrophic back to oligotrophic, with the corresponding indicators going in the right direction. Total phosphorus is down to around 6 parts per billion. It's been cut in half. That's remarkable. The water clarity is up, but we can't take full credit for that because we have zebra mussels. So they've been doing their filtration duty with that. And obviously this is not just septic systems being replaced. There's a lot of, BMPs in the ag lands to the north of the lake. But with any management plan, it's a whole series of things that you do to try to improve the quality of the lake. Those of you who do work in Lake George know that fully well. So what did we learn? What have we learned? I mentioned public education. You can't do enough of that. You've got to get people as much as possible on your side with what you're going to do. The acceptance criteria, very, very important to be clear, and don't make any exceptions. Stick to it. The administration is extensive, particularly with failed systems. The kind of follow-up that's required, we didn't realize how much time that would take. It took a lot of time. And we thought this was a great idea for people to share a system, cut that cost in half. Didn't go over too good. Legal issues and so on and so forth did not work so well. Bottom line, people love their lake. And we know they just do. And so if you work with them, in this case, they had to pay the full bill. They'll go along with it if you work with them in a collaborative manner. Don't bang them over the head with this thing. Contact information. I know I've gone through this fairly fast, and I think we probably have some time for questions, but anyone who wants more information on this, feel free to contact me. I can go into more detail.
Great, thanks,
Okay.
Wayne.
All right, Chris.
Thank you.